Hello, well, hope you're all keeping safe. Just going to wait a couple of minutes to see who comes on. So I'm in my leather workshop at the moment and I'm actually just trying out some new streaming. So we'll see how this goes. I've got a slightly different setup and want to see if this works or not. So hopefully you're hearing me loud and clear. I'll just pop out my chat. Hello Dustin, that's great, good to hear from you. Yeah, keeping well here, in lockdown, so not a lot going on in terms of being confined to the house, but all is well, thank you very much. I hope it's all okay for you as well. It's a bit of a funny situation. Hello Carlos, you can come in. Hablo un poco español. Probably sounds awful, but yeah, speak a little bit of Spanish, not much. Well, good, a few more coming on now. Hello, and hello from Guernsey. Hello Stuart, good to see you. So yeah, thought I'd just talk a little bit about sewing machines. So if you've got a question about sewing machines, please fire away. Can you, sound is good, thanks so much. Sounds very clear, that's great. Good. I'm actually got a different sort of streaming setup. So I've connected my regular video camera and I'm using a little Cam Link, it's called, a little sort of device you plug into a laptop. So I'm hoping that works. And I'll probably be sort of fumbling a bit with the controls here. So we'll see how it goes. Abalik, hello. So, yep, some good time for some leather crafting. It is at the moment, I guess. I mean, it's a terrible situation in the world at the moment, and it's obviously all very worrying, and I hope everyone's keeping safe and well. But yes, in the sort of, when you're sort of in isolation, doing your bit not to spread the virus, then doing some leather crafting's actually very nice. It's a good way of doing it. And perhaps sharing some things or giving leather presents to keep people's spirits up is a nice thing to do as well. Oh, hello Glenn from Denmark, that's great. And Brad, howdy, Texas. That's great, we've got a nice few people on. Can I recommend a vintage cylinder arm? Difficult one, really. Cylinder arms are great machines to have. The only vintage cylinder arm I have is the leather Patcher, the Singer 29K, and it's the old boot Patcher. I think it's a great machine if you're wanting to sort of dabble your feet with a leather machine, because it does everything to a reasonable sort of standard. Probably nothing apart from sewing a circle very perfectly, but it is quite a good sort of machine to start out with, because you learn quite a lot. It's a very thin cylinder arm, so that's good as well. If I could only buy this, Dustin, get one and had a pretty limited budget, which would I buy, like under $300 US? Well, it would depend, Dustin, what I was wanting to make. But if, for example, I was wanting to make wallets, I would probably go with something like the Singer 331K that I've got. It's an old vintage machine. I paid £50 UK, so very roughly, you know, $50 US for the machine. I then put a roller foot on it, and I can probably show you somewhere. I've got stacks of wallets everywhere. So is that going to show up on camera? Will it focus? I don't know. But that's the kind of stitching you can get. So if it's a flat sew, like a wallet, you haven't got great ridges or seams you're having to climb. So a basic machine without needle feed, without walking foot, will actually work quite happily. So at the moment, I mean, I've got a Juki behind me, which has needle feed and walking feet and everything else. But actually, for the wallets, I'm loving using my old Singer 331. I've got the roller foot on, but I can just take my time hand cranking. I know it seems so old-fashioned, hand cranking away with it, and it's a very nice machine. So if you're wanting to do things like notebooks and wallets, I would say consider something like the Singer 331. The earlier version of it was the Singer 31. In the UK they had the K designation, Kilbarry. I think in Canada, US, it might be W for Wisconsin. I might have that totally wrong. And I think in Australia there's another designation, but one of the old Singers, like the 331K. I showed a foot conversion because I got this one without the roller foot in another film. So that wouldn't be bad if you're wanting to do wallets. Obviously, if you're wanting to do gun holsters or heavy duty belts, then you're going to need a big harness type machine, and they tend to be a bit more expensive. I'm just looking at the comments down here. So, oh, that's great. Welcome, Duncan, anyway, if you're saying your first time on. Good. We got Rod from Down Under. And thanks, Logan. I'm pleased to hear this sound is working okay. It's a complicated thing to set up a live stream when you're not just using a phone. So I thought I'd try something else. I'm trying to set my workshop up so I can move the camera around a bit and show you different things. So I'll try a few more of these and see how we go. Brad, is a needle positioner useful, or is it just being lazy? I was thinking of adding one due to direction changing in the project. I think people have different feelings about needle position. I have the facility with my servo motors to put needle position on, and actually I've taken the needle positioning units off. Now, that's, I think it's a personal thing. A lot of people say, well, you're crazy, if you've got needle positioning, use it. Just in case you haven't come across needle position, what it does is you can tell, if you have a servo motor running your sewing machine, a modern servo motor, you can tell it always to finish, say, with needle down or needle up. Now, for leather work, I think very often you'd want to finish with needle down. So if the needle goes down, you can then rotate to your leather work. And whenever you take your foot off the pedal and stop sewing, that needle will be down, anchoring your work, and you can change direction. So it's quite a nice facility, but personally I run my machines so slowly, so I gear all my machines down. So a servo will take you down to about 300 RPM. I then take them down to something like 80 RPM using pulleys. So I run my machines like ding, 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 not very fast at all. As a result, I don't bother having the needle positioning device fixed on the machine. I quite like the flexibility of sometimes finishing in the up position, sometimes finishing with the needle down. So it is a personal thing. I think if you've geared the machine down heavily like I have, so it's a 3:1 ratio in addition to the lowest output of a servo, then you're going very slow and you don't need needle position. But it's a bit of a personal one there. Other people may well have a different view. Just have a look down. Oh, hello from Sweden, PVC Lime. I'm using 29K, and what do you have to say about different needles? Cutting needles or standard? I've seen there's many different cutting profiles. Yeah, a while ago I popped a film up on using different needles actually in my Juki, but it'd be the same with any other machine. Sometimes you want to use just a plain point needle, and sometimes for leather work you want to use a leather point needle. Now generally I would say if you're using sort of standard leather working, you want a leather point because the needle has a chisel end. It will go into the leather more easily than a point needle, and also it will give a nice finish because you can have all the stitches slightly slanting, and that just looks very nice. And if you, what I often do is I'll sew a seam, so back to my wallet, you can barely see the stitching on one side of the wallet. On the other side where it's a bit more visible, I sew it and then I hammer the stitches down, and it just spreads the leather and makes the stitching look quite nice. So I like using leather point needles most of the time. I occasionally swap them out and use just a plain point if I'm trying to make a very discreet stitch, but otherwise I do use the leather point. And I think the machines cut in more easily with leather point. So thanks for that one. Have I ever heard of a Sailrite sewing machine? This is from Connor. Hi Connor. They use them for canvas sails. Yeah, I haven't got any personal experience of them. I think they're probably quite big in the US, and I believe they're very, very good. They're quite robust, quite strong machines. So, as I say, I haven't really got any personal knowledge or experience. I'm not even certain if they're any form of needle feed, or whether they have sort of jumping feet or what they have. But I do know that they're quite robust. I've popped a film up where I talk about things like needle feed. Basically, if you have a needle feed machine, the needle, instead of just going up and down, it sort of goes forward, stabs your lever, and then drags it through the transit mechanism. And it's really useful where you're trying to climb seams. So if you've got a bulky seam, if you just put it through a machine without a needle feed, you'll find if you look at the stitches carefully, they'll go sort of long, and then they'll start going short, as the needle is trying to climb the seam in the leather. The transit mechanism doesn't give it a smooth transit. If you have a needle feed and look at the stitches afterwards, you'll see they're very consistent and they're very nice. So a needle feed is very nice if you're doing work like, say, on bags where you've got quite bulky seams and you're trying to get over those seams. For something, as I say, like a flat sew where you've got a wallet, the seams are actually very small, so you'll probably get away without having a needle feed. Just having a quick look down. I'll stick to machines at the moment. I know that I'm getting other comments, and I will look at those because I'll put up other live feeds where we're looking at dies. So, Zisham, I'll come back to yours at another time. What sewing machine would I recommend for beginners? Difficult one. I think the one thing I would say with leather sewing machines generally is, apart from the fact they tend to be quite expensive, they're very specific for a particular job. Now, when I started out in leather work, I didn't really appreciate this. So I went and bought the whacking big Singer harness machine, which you'll see in an earlier film, the Singer 133K. And it was a lovely beast of a machine. It would punch through, several layers of veg tan. And had I been making axe covers, bill hook covers and holsters, it would have been a very nice machine to start out with. Because I tend to do lighter weight stuff, so I'm doing quite a few wallets at the moment, and I've been doing a few bags on and off, I wouldn't really want such a heavy machine, because you can get a smaller, lighter machine which would be better optimized for the lighter leather. So I do think you need to sort of look at what sort of leather work you want to be doing, and then try and get a machine that will match the weight of the leather work. Now, if you don't know at all at the moment, when you set out, I say the harness machine was my first machine. Actually thinking about it, maybe the Singer Patcher, the cobbler's machine was my first machine. I know they're old fashioned, but if you can pick up a cheap Patcher, it's a good all-round machine that will get you going. And it doesn't have to cost much. I know on eBay they tend to go for a bit of a price sometimes, but if you look around the classifieds, you'll find one popping up, not too expensive. So I would look at something like that as an initial machine and consider whether you think that will meet your general needs. If you know you're going to just be doing heavyweight leather, obviously then you want a heavyweight machine, but it will be expensive. So if you're wanting to set out with something not too expensive, I would go, as I say, with something like the Patcher or like the Singer 331, which I was talking about a minute ago, and I've popped the film up on. This is helpful, Peter, and he's saying this is for Connor, who asked a question about the Sailrights a minute ago. He said, I've got a Sailrite, fantastic heavy duty walking foot machine, built like a tank. Well, that's great, Peter, thanks. And that does sort of confirm, I had a suspicion they were nice and strong. I didn't know much else about them, but that's great. So yeah, it's got the walking foot as well, so that sounds like a nice machine. Walking foot, you get all these terms with leather machines. Basically, when you've got, let's get a bit of leather here, just try and explain what I'm on about. When you've got a bit of leather going through the transit through a machine, the needle stabs it, it would tend to sort of pull up, the whole bit of leather would rise if you didn't have the walking foot. The walking foot basically pushes down on the leather to keep it in position while the needle stabs it, and then it sort of walks forward a pace and pulls the leather through the transit mechanism, and then the needle can re-stab again. So it's a very good system for leather machines to sort of push the leather through the transit mechanism. It's not the best system though, because the best system is really a combination of like a walking foot, which pulls the leather through, and also the needle feed, which stabs it and also pulls the leather through. So if you think in terms of cars, or a walking foot is a bit like two-wheel drive. Having the addition of the needle feed as well is a bit like having a four-wheel drive car. It gives you a very good steady passage going through. So very helpful kind of machine to have. So welcome from Russia there. I'm sorry, my Russian is not good, but welcome. Please answer. First time have question, please. And sorry, where are we now? I think we've gone up. I think it was about dyes, wasn't it? I'm sorry. Can I get this going up? Quick look. Comments coming quick, so it's hard. I'm sorry. Oh right, okay. Yep, this was about Fibings colour dyes. I'm going to keep two machines, but very quickly, as you've asked, first-time questioner, I will help you on this one. And just to say, with the feeding dyes, you'll find the oil professional dyes are more resilient than the water-based Fibings dyes. And you can coat, once you've dyed something like a seam or an edge, you can coat it with a sealant. So you can get a PVA sealant and you can coat it, and that will actually reduce the dye creepage. So that's, if like, a good tip is to put a sealant over it once you've done the dyeing, but to use the professional oil dye, not the water-based dye. So I hope that helps you on that. But let's keep to machines. People ask me how many machines I have, and I think that's because over the years on YouTube I've put up quite a few different machines. The reality is actually that I don't now have very many. I have my old Patcher, which I keep for old time's sake. I quite like it. I don't really use it much at all now, to be frank. I have the Juki flatbed, which I use a lot for bags, and I think it's a great compound feed machine, great for bags. And I have a cylinder arm machine, which is a clone machine, so it's not an original manufacturer machine. It's like the PAF 335, so it's a cylinder arm, again very good for bags. On clones, people sometimes ask me to say, oh, is a clone machine worth having compared to the manufacturer original? So the Juki, as a manufacturer, high quality, made in Japan original, is an expensive machine. The clones can be about half the price. I think provided you buy from a reputable dealer, you can get a good quality clone. And I've certainly been very happy with my clone machine, which was very cheap, but it's been extremely good, and I have absolutely, I'm very happy with it. So that's the Taiso that you may have seen me use in films like where I'm stitching up mail bags and things like that, cylinder arm machine. But it's a lot cheaper than the likes of the Juki, and I think it's a perfectly good, adequate machine. I mean, if you're running them like 24 hours a day, you might want your manufacturer originals, but if you're just using them now and again, I personally think the clones are great. So I'd be quite heartily, as long as you go for a good quality clone, you won't have a problem. Same with the skiving machine. I have a clone of a Fortuna type skiving machine, and it's fine, absolutely no problems at all. Brandon, what are you saying? You're saying, are needle feeds any good at all? I'm getting my first machine and I believe walking foot is best, but I've seen many needle feeds around me for less. Spend more, get walking foot. Right. Tricky one there in a way, in as much as, yes, walking foot is great. Needle feeds, sometimes you get needle feed on lighter weight upholstery type machines. So what you need to look at there, I think, is the general robustness of the actual machine. Is it made for leather work or is it made for upholstery? So if you can get a combination of basically walking foot and needle feed, that's the ultimate. So it's like a compound feed. You've got the feed dogs underneath, you've got the needle feed doing its work, and you've got the walking foot. All three things getting your leather through. So that's the ultimate. If you then have to go down, most people in leather work will probably get a walking foot machine, partly because there are a lot of them around. Needle feed on its own tends to be on the lighter weight machines. So, as I say, I think it's great to get the needle feed, but you need a heavy machine if you're working reasonable weight of leather. And again, it's a matter of looking at the weight of the leather you're sewing. If you're sewing very thin, delicate leather, you can get away with a domestic machine. If you're using pigskin or something really thin, that's not a challenge, you can get away with something quite light. If you're using something like wallets, I'm getting away with this Singer 331 perfectly happily. If you're, on the other hand, doing holsters, you're going to need a pretty beefy machine. So you need to, first and foremost, think about what are you making, what weight of machine do you need, then think about your transit mechanism. So do you want walking foot or walking foot plus needle feed? I hope that helps. Hello from Argentina, Pepe. That's great. And Dustin, what's your primary leather supplier? I'm not going to go into that, Dustin, because I'm talking about machines. But I have put up films, both Metropolitan Leather and Sedgwick's. So if you're in for harness leather, I'd look at them. Yeah, what leather is good for making a mask respirator? I don't know, I'm not a medical person. But it's a very good point indeed. I think there's probably a whole host of issues there to consider, so I won't attempt to go there. Yeah, right. M. Dane, I've just purchased 2 machines from China, cylinder armour flatbed, both for leather, cheaper than what I can purchase them in the States. Yeah, well, I think I've seen a few people do that actually. They go on to AliExpress or Alibaba, order machines, and I've got a couple of friends who've done it. They've been very happy. I suppose you haven't got the backup of a dealer in your own country, would be my only sort of slight hesitation. But if you're happy mechanical, you're happy taking a bit of a punt, then you will obviously get a far cheaper machine. So I've seen a very nice post bed one of my friends got doing that, and the price was crazy. But as I say, it comes potentially at a price if you hit problems, but probably won't. But it is a gamble. So yeah, I tend to personally have bought my machines from dealers. I'm in the UK, so I've got them from dealers where I know if I get a problem I can go back to them. But take your choice really. Oh, thanks Sheriff for saying about seeing live. Yeah, I thought I'd do this. It's just a way to sort of, particularly I think with all this COVID going on at the moment, life is tough for everyone. I think we're all having to adjust. It's very unsettling. I don't know about you, but I'm finding it quite sort of, it's stressy. It's unsettling. You don't like to see people suffering. You don't like to see the uncertainty. One's obviously worried for one's own friends, family, and one's own health. It is a worrying time. So I thought I'd pop 1 or 2 live feeds up, and it's just a chance to have a bit of a chat and cover a few things which sometimes you can't do in a video. And I thought, being realistic, if you're on your own, it's nice, isn't it? I've been using WhatsApp on the video quite a lot to talk to friends, and it's nice being able to sort of talk to people and get a bit of interaction. So yeah, I thought my little way of trying to help anyway, but thanks for that, that's great. I'll wrap it up fairly soon, partly because I'm down to quite low on my battery now, but can you use spooled thread, can it go bad over time? I use bonded nylon, I'm having thread fray and not sure if it's tension or bad thread. I have noticed that when I buy expensive bonded nylon thread from a good supplier, it doesn't fray. When I buy it off the likes of eBay, I tend to get more fraying. So I think there's probably a bit of an issue there, possibly, that you get what you pay for. So it's not a big problem, but I have noticed that if I've got cheap spools, they have tended to fray a bit more. So to be honest, to avoid the hassle, I just buy the better quality stuff. But people will have, again, different views. That's only my view. I'm not saying it's right or not, and I think price for what you can get some very good thread on eBay, so I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying I think if you're worried about it fraying a bit occasionally, if you go through like a 500 meter roll and you find 2 or 3 lots during that whole roll give you a slight fray, that's probably not a problem for most people. and therefore why worry kind of thing. But if it's something where it does bother you, then I think it's worth considering paying a bit more. It's also worth changing out your needles very frequently, because the needles can get little burrs on them that can start to sort of fray the thread. I've noticed also the guides on the machines, if you don't keep those smooth, you can get the same sort of problem. Yeah, how do you work the lever around when you're doing a bag with a full piece gusset? Difficult. It's not easy. It's amazing how resistant leather is when you got a bag shape. I think I learnt the hard way. I made the first leather bag I did it in veg tan, thick, nice, heavy veg tan. When I came to turn it inside out, the leather was roughly about 6 ounce leather. I physically couldn't turn it inside out. I just made it, it was too solid, and it wouldn't have worked. And that was a learning experience. So now, generally, when I'm making bags, I use a lighter leather. I use like a 4 ounce or thereabouts, or more supple leather that, you know, has more suppleness to it. It's not such a firm temper. And so I think it's worth scrunching the leather in your hands and seeing how flexible and does it move nicely. And if it does, you know you've got quite a nice bag leather. So if you go for some calf, so it's a bit extra rolled up on the shelves there. But if you go for a nice bit of calf leather, it would generally have a bit more fluid and movement than if you go for, you know, a sort of thicker bovine type leather. So I think leather selection for bags is quite important. And what's worth doing is actually, if you can get a bit of leather that isn't too important to you, a bit of an offcut, is test it to destruction. So this is what I've done. I've sort of sewn up a sort of half a bag, and then I've tried to destroy it, and I've seen where the weak points are. And you'll be amazed at how light you can make the leather and how fine you can make the stitches, and it will still hold. But obviously you want to make sure it holds plus, you know, 50% again to make sure it's strong. You don't want it failing. But I think as someone who probably started out making some bags, I over-engineered everything. And when you actually come to look at the commercial offerings, you can see why they make them a bit lighter. So that's my thoughts on that one. Thanks, Duncan. That's nice what you've just said there. Thank you. So yeah, I think Duncan's probably summed it up very nicely. Stay well, and also to all my subscribers. And absolutely, I'm wishing you all the best in this time. I'll leave it today there. Thanks very much for joining, and thanks for all those comments. I'll have a sort of look back on them. I'll try and sort of add in 1 or 2 different videos as live feeds, but I think it's quite a nice, when we've got all this going on, to have a little bit more of a sort of interaction, and at least then we're not all quite so socially isolated, because it is very difficult at the moment, and it's difficult, I think, for all of us, you know, either financially or emotionally, or frankly on all fronts. So keep well, stay safe, wash your hands, and enjoy yourself. Thanks so much. I'll sign off there. Bye bye then.